I'm presenting now, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Today's lecture is on Baroque art. And Baroque art is really related to three things that we talked about. One from the past unit, and two from this unit. One of the things that Baroque art is related to is the Catholic Reformation. It's sort of like the fifth Reformation that we started. You know, it starts with the Council of Trent and fixing the corruption of the church and all that kind of thing. Another thing, something that we talked about from this particular unit, is the Dutch Golden Age. We started off with this constitutional state, the Republic, the Dutch Republic, or the Republic of the Netherlands. And then also, it's related to the absolute monarchies that we were talking about, like the Peter the Greats and the Louis XIV, to the Habsburgs, to the Prussian Hohenzollerns at this point in time. And all of them are somewhat similar in the way that they look visually, and then once again, this art is supporting these different things. It is contextually related to the Catholic Reformation or the Dutch Golden Age or the Royal State. Oftentimes, when you look at the art or at the figures in the art, you're going to see them expressing strong emotion. Look at their faces. There's anguish. There's joy. There's a kind of regal, powerful look on their face, but they're expressing strong emotion. You can kind of tell what they are thinking. You can almost feel their psychological state of mind. And the artists who are using this Baroque style are virtuosos. That is to say, they're experts. They're really good. They can make things look very realistic. For me, as a very simple person, when I enjoy art that I can't do. I can't make things look realistic. I'm a stick figure kind of guy. Back then, in this Baroque time, you really had to be a very good artist to make things look really great. There's also, oftentimes, this thing called tenebroso, which is a strong contrast between light and dark. Much of the painting will be dark, and then there will be sort of like lights shining on certain parts. The important parts are lighter than the much darker parts. In general, it's kind of a dark kind of painting. Bits and pieces of light there. You can even do that, believe it or not, with statues sometimes. Think about when you're looking at these things, the patron who bought it, for what purpose, who the painter is, or who the sculptor is, the author, what's the purpose of this work of art, and then for whom is this work of art created? Who's the audience who's supposed to be looking at that? So, I think the three different kinds of Baroque art have very different patrons, or the painters are pretty much the same. And sometimes, in fact, there could be a painter who is painting both things for the church and also things for a monarch. But the audience is going to be different. If you're thinking about a religious painting, who's the audience? The people that attend the church, and then maybe you see that painting in the church. And if you are somebody from the Netherlands and you've created somebody has created a work of art for a merchant from the Netherlands, who's going to be looking at that particular work of art? Where's it going to hang? Maybe a bank. Maybe a shop. We'll have to kind of look at that and think about where they are and who the audience is. Well, with the Catholic Reformation and the Baroque art of the Catholic Reformation, I think what this art shows us is a resurgence of the Catholic Church. I know that the Catholic Church got very corrupt in the Renaissance era. I know that there were a number of different kinds of reformations and people splitting away from the Catholic Church, but a whole bunch of people came back to the Catholic Church too. They were won back by the Jesuits or by the end of corruption. Lots of people didn't, but nonetheless. What the Catholics wanted to do after the Council of Trent, besides cleaning things up, is they wanted to reinforce what Catholicism was all about, the belief system of Catholicism, the philosophy and the theology of Catholicism through the art. And they wanted to bring the worshiper, somebody in church, closer to God. They wanted to show people what they should be like, or they wanted to show them examples from people from the past who martyred themselves, for example. And the suggestion is that the people of this point in time should also martyr themselves in this fight against Protestantism, or stay very loyal to the Catholic Church. It's also the opposite of the Calvinist iconoclasm. Do you know what I'm talking about with that? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Calvinists destroyed a ton of paintings and sculptures.
Where did they do that?
In the churches.
Yes, they want you, when you're in the space, it's kind of like this lovely room here. White, plain. You're not supposed to be distracted by beautiful things. You just are supposed to ignore that. Hear the Word of God. Think about the Word of God. Reflect upon that. The sola scriptura, the Word, is important. Not for the Catholic Church so much. Oftentimes they don't want people to be reading the Bible for themselves. When people read the Bible for themselves, they fall into error. So listen to the priest, listen to the Pope. He'll tell you what to believe. You don't need to read things for yourself. I do like this room for this mood lighting that we have. Makes me feel like it's a weird night. Caravaggio is probably the greatest of the Italian Baroque artists. He's a painter, he's a sketchy guy, quite frankly. At one point in time, he killed a person over a game of tennis that he was playing.
Wait, did they have tennis back then?
They did indeed.
Okay.
Yeah, Henry VIII was really good at tennis, actually.
What?
Yeah. Caravaggio has this wonderful story from the Old Testament that keeps getting repeated over and over again by all kinds of artists, even into the modern era. It's called Judith slaying Holofernes. Judith is a Jewish woman who sneaks into the camp of the Assyrian general Holofernes before a battle when the Assyrians are going to destroy the Israelites in battle. She sneaks into his tent, she plies him with wine, she makes him some promises that she doesn't intend to keep, and after she gets him drunk, she takes out his sword and beheads him. She and her companion then speared away the head, and the next day when the Assyrians are looking for their general, hey, here's your general's head. It prevents the battle, or basically the Israelites win the battle because of that. So here's Judith in the process of slaying Holofernes. Do you like it?
Are these made on dark canvas?
They are painted darkly with light-colored things to show you what's important. Do you see the blood spurting? Do you see her facial expression? Do you see what is that for a facial expression?
Disgust.
Is it disgust? It's hard to cut off somebody's head and the blood is spurting and everything. Well, that facial expression, or what she's doing, I think, is what sometimes Catholics have to do in order to defend their faith from, bad people. Let's call them Protestants. Here's another one that I really like too. This is St. Thomas. He's called Doubting Thomas. And at one point in time, Jesus appears to the disciples in a closed, locked room. Thomas is not there. And Jesus basically appears to his disciples after his death, and everybody's really kind of shocked and happy that he's been resurrected, right? Jesus then disappears. Thomas shows up, and the disciples say, Thomas, you should have been here. Jesus was here. And he says, what? No, quit pulling my leg. I might be paraphrasing that. And then Thomas says, I won't believe that Jesus rose from the dead unless he stands before me and I can examine his wounds. So later on, sure enough, Jesus shows up and says, Thomas, here it is, check it out. And Thomas sticks his finger in the wound where Jesus was pierced with a spear. So, what's the message there?
Don't doubt Jesus.
Don't doubt Jesus, right. Have faith, for goodness sakes. And if you think about Catholicism, it's really all about having faith. Protestantism too. But don't doubt the church. Don't doubt Jesus. This is another one that's kind of similar to that. This is the calling of St. Matthew. Jesus comes in, and Jesus is choosing a disciple. And he's choosing kind of like the least likely person ever to be a follower of Jesus, a tax collector. Somebody who is collecting taxes from the Jewish people, a Jewish person himself, for the Romans. Scum. Nobody does this. Nobody should do this. And here he is. He's counting the money over here. And Jesus is choosing him. And even this guy's like, what, are you crazy? The tax collector? You're going to choose the tax collector to be your disciple? And Jesus says, yes. Because this is so anti-Calvinist.
Something with predestination.
Yeah. Calvinists are predestined for salvation. They're sort of born into salvation. They prove themselves by the way that they live. And sure enough, at the end of their lives, off to heaven they go. This is a scum of the earth kind of guy who hasn't been living well at all. And yet he's going to be saved. He's going to be redeemed through Jesus. Jesus hung out with some pretty sketchy people. They weren't all, sort of immediately saved kinds of people. And that's the message. You don't have to be born saved. You can work your way into it. Here's a giant Jesus baby or Jesus toddler. It's called the Madonna of Loreto. And you see those two old people having a great deal of faith. It's kind of the lowest people who should be big fans of Catholicism, according to the church, in sort of an interesting propaganda way. That's a big baby. Artesania Gentileschi is a female artist, and that's why she's very excited. She learns her craft from her father, who's an artist. She's able to work as an artist. Sadly for her, people make a lot of this episode that happened to her in her life when another artist sexually assaulted her. And then when you look at her Judith slaying Holofernes, you can kind of see. Look at Artesimia. See what she looks like right now. This is a self-portrait of her painting something. And now I think we're going to go right to Judith slaying Holofernes. Do you see the facial expression of Judith?
Which one is Judith?
The one with the sword.
She likes it.
She's maybe not so grossed out by this. And in fact, she kind of looks a heck of a lot like Artesimia Gentileschi. So a lot of people are kind of saying, well, there's got to be, she's painting herself, killing someone, could be the person who attacked her. They seem to be pretty I don't know, not excited, but at least willing to do this nasty work of killing your enemy and protecting your own people. In the same way that Catholics have to kill Protestants sometimes. The 30 Years' War is looming on the horizon at 1611, 1612. So think about that.
I like the blood spurts.
I do too. Gian Lorenzo Bernini is a sculptor. He's an architect. He helps the Pope rebuild Rome. Rome needs a lot of rebuilding. It starts in the Renaissance and just keeps on rolling along. And once again, self-portrait. He does beautify Rome. He does quite a bit of improving a lot of the ruins of Rome and creating some things which are really quite nice. But he also gets involved in art. For example, the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. Teresa is a nun who had some sort of illness, some sort of affliction where she couldn't get out of bed, and she was lying in bed for a really long period of time. And she had this mystical experience of an angel coming down and piercing her heart with this arrow of Jesus' love. And she really enjoyed it, I guess is what you could say. This statue, or these two statues, are underneath a light source in the roof, and so light shines down. Once again, it's kind of Baroque in a weird kind of way, with dark and light at the right period of time, shining on the things that are important. Saint Teresa is a person of faith, of course, and the love of Jesus is really what's being emphasized there. Bernini also delves into that royal state stuff. where he creates an equestrian statue of King Louis XIV, making him look like a Roman god of war or Roman Caesar. He also creates this wonderful throne of St. Peter in St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, where you see a light source once again, and you've got this throne and sort of all the gold-colored stuff. You have all these little, what I like to call naked babies, flying around. These are cherubim and seraphim. These are kinds of little creatures that you would find in heaven. This is showing you what heaven would look like, and showing you the importance of the Pope having a throne. It's the same throne that Jesus would sit on if Jesus were there. And of course, the Pope is the one who sits there now. Moving away from the Catholic Reformation and moving towards the art of the Netherlands. The Netherlands is a place that's 2/3 Calvinist. And Calvinists with iconoclasm really don't like the church art very much. So if you're rejecting icons, you're going to want to have your artists paint different things. Contextually, you need to show off the Netherlands rather than the Catholic Church and have a place to hang that. If you're Calvinist, 1/3 of people are Catholic, and so there are people who are buying religious art and hanging it in Catholic churches or in their own homes, for example. But mostly it's just kind of a Calvinist thing. And so show us the golden age of the Netherlands is kind of what's going on. Rembrandt is one of several very famous artists at this period of time in the Netherlands. Rembrandt is Catholic, but it doesn't really affect things too much. He likes, and the Dutch like, to have companies of people, groups of people portrayed together. And so this is called the Night Watch. There's a lot of allegory in this that I don't particularly understand. But you can see that there are these people who are armed to the teeth, a kind of militia company. And if we're talking about 1642, we're talking about the 30 Years' War, but the Dutch aren't really involved in the 30 Years' War really directly, but they had this thing called the 80 Years' War, or the Dutch Revolt. With the Spanish, exactly. And so there's a lot of people who fought against the Spanish, these militia companies. Oftentimes you see them portrayed together, or you see people who are armed, who are, willing to stand up for Little Netherlands and its independence from other people. Who, by the way, is about to attack the Netherlands? And we're talking about 1642. Roll forward 20 years, 30 years or so. Who's going to start attacking the Netherlands in the 1670s and keep attacking the Netherlands until about 1715 or so? France. And who's the absolute ruler of France? Louis XIV. Perfect. So they're going to need to defend themselves. They're going to have a golden era anyway. But here are some guild masters. These are the sampling officials of the Drapers Guild. I think they look a lot like pilgrims. Because the pilgrims came to the Netherlands for a short period of time before they went off to North America. And so, they're adopting the style of dress, I think, of Dutch people. These guys are probably Calvinists. They look to be pretty happy with themselves. They're part of this Drapers Guild, this cloth guild. And do you see what they have on the desk? Sure, they've got the drape there, that's the carpet or whatever, but what else do they have? What's this guy got in his hand here on the, your right? Can you tell what that is, or can you tell what this is? It's a big book. Maybe it's a book of, credits and debits, or keeping track of all the money that they have. Or this here looks like to me to be a big bag of money. These guys are wealthy people. They want to show that off. They're also Calvinists. They don't want to show it off. So there's this sort of, back and forth between being comfortable and being wealthy and not being showy with your wealth, not being ostentatious with it. It's all about comfort. Here is evidence that the Dutch are making scientific advancements or are interested in improving knowledge. This is the anatomy lecture of Dr. Nicholas Puth. This is probably paid for by these guys who are studying under him to become doctors, perhaps. And he's obviously opened up the arm of this corpse, and they're maybe learning something about it. Everyone, once again, is nicely dressed, and they're learning something. I'm not sure what this is over here on the right. This reminds me of the time that Peter the Great was taking a tour of the Netherlands, and he was, imagine Peter the Great in this group of guys, and then the Russian boyars, the Russian noblemen, were not wanting to see what was going on here. They were all cowering in the corner, and he made them bite through the tendons that you see exposed there. That's a fun story. Here's just a nice Catholic scene of Jacob blessing the sons of Joseph. It's kind of a family sort of thing, but there's some comfort there. There's some sort of family relationships there that are really quite nice. Frans Hals is a different artist, and this one is called The Laughing Cavalier. We've heard about cavaliers from this unit. Who or what was a cavalier? Charles I in the English Civil War, exactly. Yeah, a cavalier is generally a horseman, usually kind of a nobleman. You can tell that he's really quite fancy. He's got all of this nice clothing, and he's pretty self-satisfied. He's got that really sweet mustache and beard as well. Here's the banquet of the officers of the St. George Militia Company. It's a similar kind of thing to what we saw with Rembrandt, where you have these guys in 1616 who are getting together to have a feast. And we can't really see the whole feast, but we can see that there's a lot of different kinds of food there. They're showing off just the wealth of the Netherlands. They're also showing off how these guys, at one point in time, they're all old veterans, right? But at one point in time, they were together in a militia company fighting against the Spanish, probably. Everyone seems to be really kind of satisfied with themselves, a little bit smug, I think. Look at the comfort that the Dutch like to show people in their art.
Look at all the food we have.
It's so much greater variety than what you find in many other places. Imagine the Russian serf. What does a Russian serf eat every day? Beets and gruel. And these guys who are connected throughout the world with their ships and their trade routes have all of this kind of stuff. Do you see products and things from overseas?
Yeah, I see a parrot.
There's a parrot, there's a very tiny monkey.
Watermelon in there?
Yep, there's citrus fruits, there's all kinds of, there's useless little dogs. You don't need a dog like this for anything other than psychological comfort, right? It means you're wealthy if you can have a dog that is useless. No offense to your tiny dogs. There's also musical instruments. What does that indicate? Wealth, culture, other pursuits other than working. It's really nice stuff there. Finally, we'll end things with looking at the royal state, the absolutist state, to try to glorify and to try to deify the rulers of these absolute states is kind of the purpose of Baroque art for that. Peter Paul Rubens is somebody who is from what would that be at that point in time? The Spanish Netherlands, Belgium, and then Diego Velázquez, you might be able to tell by his name, is a Spaniard. And so both of these guys are Catholic guys. They've got a little bit of a connection to Catholicism, especially Rubens, and then they're trying to glorify the royal state as well. Peter Paul Rubens does a bit of mythological work. He does a bit of religious work, and he does, as I say, some themes or some paintings that show rulers having a connection to God. Once again, this is a Catholic kind of thing, and so not necessarily connected to the royal state, but I wanted to show it to you anyway. You know the story of Daniel in the lion's den? Daniel is thrown to the lions, and his faith saves him. God basically keeps the lions from eating him. And look at the lions. The lions actually have facial expressions. Do you see that? Okay. And Daniel has a facial expression as well, which is, yeah, it's kind of a please save me sort of thing. His faith is going to save him. Those lions seem to be kind of angry or put off that they're not allowed to eat him, but they're going to listen to God. And then over here on the right-hand side is the elevation of the cross. It's Jesus being placed on the cross, or being set upright on the cross, and it's just kind of a faith, one of these sorts of faith paintings. Do you notice something about Daniel and about Jesus in terms of body size? They have a lot of muscle. Even the lions seem to have a lot of muscle. The people that Peter Paul Rubens paints are oftentimes very muscular and very, very big. Here is the birth of Louis XIII, the father of Louis XIV, and then the apotheosis, or the making of a god out of his father, Henry IV, or Henry of Navarre. Do you see over here on the left, you see the baby? Yeah. It's kind of hard to see. And you see Marie de Medici, the mother, she's kind of just hanging out there, and there's a flag, and it seems like everything is really kind of like a divine birth. Real birth doesn't look like that. Real birth is much nastier, and there are a bunch of people sort of standing around in odd costumes. Just like when you die, it doesn't usually look like this. There are people who are very sad about the death. Here's the wife or the widow here is kind of looking down and it's very sad. But look what's happening over here to the left. They're bringing him up to heaven. The ruler, Henry IV, is being deified. He's becoming a god. Which, once again, for the royal state, that's the point. The ruler is a kind of god. Here's Diego Velázquez. He, too, in his self-portrait is kind of smug, or kind of self-satisfied. He's going to put himself into a painting in just a moment that I'll show you, which is really pretty cool. Here is Philip IV. Philip IV is a Habsburg ruler in Spain before Charles II takes over. Charles II, who is genetically all messed up to the point where they had to have that War of Spanish Succession after he died. Do you see Philip's odd chin and his lips?
Isn't that the Habsburg jaw?
It's the Habsburg jaw. Yeah, it's from all of that marrying cousins and aunts marrying nephews and over again. It's what leads Charles II to be what he was. So this is a really cool painting on the right-hand side. This is called Las Meninas, and this is a look into the private quarters of the King and Queen of Spain. The little blonde girl in the middle is the princess, and she has a bunch of noble friends who are her playmates. She also has a little person. You see the little person over here on the right? Little people oftentimes were hired by noblemen, noblewomen, and royal courts because they found them very amusing. Peter the Great had like an entire set of little people that he really enjoyed. And what you see here is Diego Velázquez. He's painting. You see the giant canvas that he has there? He's painting, and you can see who he's painting in the mirror. Do you see that? Yes, the King and Queen of Spain are in the mirror. And you know what's cool about this painting is we are the King and Queen of Spain. Aren't we? Yeah, because we're here, right? And we're looking at Diego Velázquez painting us. It's a really cool kind of painting. This isn't, I think, something that's going to be hanging in a palace to sort of, lord over nobles. It's kind of a more private sort of thing that they would hang maybe here in their own, in their own bed chambers or their own living quarters. And by the way, if this is their living quarters or somebody's living quarters, you see all the paintings all over the place. They're chock filled with, these rooms are just chock filled with their ancestors and current paintings of themselves. They're the kinds of people who can afford that sort of thing. And then we have the Palace of Versailles for architecture. We already looked at that when we talked about the royal estate.
How did they get the fountains up?
Mechanical devices that I don't particularly understand, probably with pushing the water pressure up in some way. I don't know if they have towers that do that. I think it's probably some sort of mechanical device.
Does this palace still stand?
Does the what?
The palace still stands.
Oh yeah. It's a super, super popular tourist destination. It's apparently very uncomfortable though. It's not like a Dutch house, where people are all about comfort. This is about grandeur, and it's about showing how powerful Louis XIV is. People who lived there talked about how badly it smelled because the nobles, especially the mid, would sometimes, instead of going to where they were supposed to go to relieve themselves, they would just kind of relieve themselves all over the place. And the servants would have to clean those kinds of things up that you got to do sometimes. Pardon? Many people were very short back then. Usually, if you were of higher social standing, you weren't quite so short because you had a much better diet. So once again, it was all about the glory of the Resurgent Catholic Church, it's about the prosperity of the Dutch, and it's about the glory of the divine faith. The next art movement that we'll study is this thing called Rococo. Rococo is all about nobles at play because as the royal state starts to fade, as we have far less powerful nobles, the aristocrats, you get kind of -1 sort of thing happening. The aristocrats and nobles push back, and they want their the parliaments to have a say and have the rights. So it's all about nobles at play.
Hey, Bobby. What is surfing?
Questions from you or questions from home?
I have a question.
I love you.